and he asked me to testify, and I said no. And he got really angry at me, and he threatened me. I'd never seen him this angry. He was like, more like, okay, you're an enemy now. He threatened me with his lawyers and said that I had perjured myself years ago and that he was the best lawyers in the world and that they were going to get me. And I just said, I don't want any part of it. You'll hear nothing from me. You know, don't worry. I was just trying to calm him down to get him
now let's
off
turn
the phone.
to James Safechuck. I know you didn't interview James Safechuck because James Safechuck had been determined by the judge to not be eligible to testify at the 2005 trial. Yet in Leaving Neverland, he tells a very detailed story that is critical to the narrative that both Michael Jackson and Michael Jackson's attorneys were contacting him into the late stages of the trial, effectively begging him to testify, which he refused to do. That, to me, sounds completely contradictory to what we know as the factual record. How does that sound in comparison to your recollection of the events of 2005?
It makes no sense because the prosecution wanted to bring in witnesses to suggest that Mr. Safechuck was molested. The judge would not let them do that. At that point, the defense had no necessity to bring in Mr. Safechuck. In fact, it would have been insane. If we had called Mr. Safechuck, that would have opened the door for the prosecution to call witnesses they claimed would have testified that he had been molested. So this story doesn't make any sense to me. Now, I know I didn't contact him. Did someone behind my back contact him in a way that made no sense? I can't speak for that. But I know it makes no sense to think the defense was planning to call Mr. Safechuck. It would have been insane.
And it is a fact that Mr. Safechuck had been declared by the judge well before the trial began as off limits, correct?
Well, off limits for the prosecution.
Right.
Now, if the defense had brought him in as a witness, that would have opened the door for the prosecution in a rebuttal case to call in their witnesses about whether or not Mr. Safechuck had been molested. But it makes no sense for the defense to keep Mr. Safechuck available to call as a witness at that point.
And what about the story of Michael Jackson calling James Safechuck in the middle of the trial, intimidating him and desperately demanding that he testify? Does that sound like the client that you knew?
No, the Michael Jackson I know doesn't intimidate anybody and would not have contacted him and tried to scare him or threaten him. That doesn't make any sense to me.
So you believe that's untrue, based upon your knowledge?
I don't believe Mr. Safechuck was contacted by the defense throughout the trial. I don't believe that because it was very clear before the trial started that any allegations about Mr. Safechuck were off.